how do we want to jump into this idea of amazing learning? And I would start by giving a bit of a nod to my mother, who was a professor for over 40 years of literature and composition. And that means that I grew up, as I say, under the grammatical gun, right? So, if I said something wrong, she'd be like, and she'd catch me. And so I began thinking about language a lot as I was growing up. What is it that we capture when we say things? What is it that we mean by the words we choose? All of these things, I think, are very important for how we begin to think about what we bring to the classroom. Essentially, the simple way of putting it would be, what are our quirks? And what I mean by a quirk, oh, by the way, I am failing to do something that I try to always do. There we go. We now have captions, at least as Google Slides can present them for us. So I hope that that's helpful as well. So when looking at something like, okay, we want to be able to know how our language works with how we think about it. For me, that's a quirk, right? And that quirk, Q-U-I-R-K, means that it's just one of those little things about my personality. We have to know those little things about our personality as we go through things. So, for example, recently I visited a friend who is a new member of a school in San Jose, the city here in California, where I live. And he joined their leadership team as their DEI director, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so when he joined, his name is Steve. When he joined the team, they had this office that had spare written on it, and he got marked out, and his name is Steve, right? And so I was looking at this door as I got to him, and we were talking, and I said, "Hey, check it out. The consonants and the vowel distribution are the same in both. Ha ha." And Steve laughed, not because it was that funny, but because he knows me, right? He's a friend. And he knows that I'm one of those people that thinks about things like consonant and vowel distributions and things like that. And so it was like, oh, okay, that's fun. We're talking with another guy at the same time, and he mentions that he's just had his 33rd wedding anniversary. I said, oh, that's fantastic, 33. That's 2 to the 5th plus 1, which again caused Steve to laugh because he knows me. All right. It's the kind of thing that I say sometimes when my wife and I are on a walk, and and I'll check out some number or some word, and I'll say something like this, and she just rolls her eyes, like, oh, there you go, and say something like, you are so on the spectrum. And let me just say that I consider that a compliment, because what we're really looking to do here is understand those bits of ourselves, right? What are the things that we do that make our classes something distinctive for our students? So I should say that my wife can probably tell me anything. I think that I won life's lottery when I met her. So I just all good. I'll just deal with whatever she says. All right. So recently I heard somebody use this phrase, speaking of language, tech well. All right. It was in connection with a conference idea, and we were talking about this, and I was like, oh, tech well, that's interesting. So let's think about how we use the idea tech well. And I said, well, what if we look at it as a verb and an adverb? So tech well, like use tech well. That's something that I think any tech conference should kind of work well with. That means that you are using the resources in your school in a legitimate way. It means that when you meet vendors and companies, that you ask them really good questions. Because if they carry the conversation, they tend to talk about things very much from their perspective. And at least here in the United States, teachers often will just kind of turn off and be, and so are you giving away free chocolate or not, right? That's kind of how we approach some of those things. But we can tech well by generating the kinds of questions that allow them to do a better job of telling us what is strong about their offerings. Perfectly normal way to go about doing tech. And we trim the tree as we go. There's another way of thinking about tech well. We can think about it as an adjective and a noun, where the well is like a water well and tech is like the water. And we draw upon our tech well to be able to use resources and tools that allow us to help connect with students who may not have fully jumped into their academic possibilities like they might. So a tech well is a resource for us in important ways. And I think that when we look at it that way, we say, okay, yeah. That's a part of how we think of technology as well. There is another way that I would look at these two words, and that would have to do with how we incorporate punctuation into it. So tech, well, right? And this is in that space of like, all right, technology is something that is important for possibilities with learning, but we might have, I hope that we have a healthy skepticism about what it can really do. Are we spending money in a way that genuinely generates a good return on our investment in terms of engagement, active learning, the kinds of things that people said in the chat earlier on, right? An encouragement to participate, and that looking forward to the next lesson, right? That lessons are truly absorbed meaningfully. So when I talk about technology and learning, one of the things that happens for a lot of teachers is they immediately begin to think about time. And naturally so, because for most teachers, the number one stress they have is time. So if that is true for you, put a yes in the chat. Or you can say no, and then you can put something else. But if time is your biggest stress, do I have enough time to get the things done, to get the grading done, to do all these different things? Put that in the chat. I see several of you are kind of responding with the said yes, absolutely, right? There is something about a sense of time that stresses us like very few other things do. And in thinking about that, I want to say that when I talk about amazing learning, that it is important as a frame to think this way. It is not about the number of minutes that we have with our students, but rather the number of moments that we craft, right? Those moments where they begin to see themselves in new ways. They begin to set aside annoying little habits that may have been a part of a much more limited sense of what the classroom and the school can be for them and their futures. So crafting moments becomes the important piece. In order to do that, we have to really be, quite open about the fact that to do that, we need a certain amount of creative time, right? That thing of like, what is it that allows us to think, okay, how do I bring this lesson to these students in an ever more fascinating way? So with that, let's jump into a few other things. I am a former high school teacher. I used to teach Japanese language. All right. And so what you're seeing on the screen at the moment is actually something that was on a banner. All right. So like, a bit of a banner that the students made. And with that, what it was is that we have a tradition here in the United States, in a lot of big high schools, we have the homecoming game, right? So this is the football game where the team has been away for a couple of weeks playing games each week, and then they come back, homecoming, and it's a big deal. There's lots of hoopla, all right? But we had a Japanese language cheering section for the homecoming game. So we'd have things on our posters and things that said this, and this says "yomenai desho," which means you probably cannot read this. That's what that means, right? And for the kids, that was kind of fun, right? It's like, all right, this is our own little joke, and we would do all of these different things. Like I would get the loudest kid in our group, big loud kid, right? He'd stand over on one side, the rest of us would be over here, and he would say Getsuyobi, and we'd all go Kayobi, and he'd say Suyobi, and we'd say Mokyobi, he'd say Kinyobi, we'd say Doyobi, and then the whole group would go Nichiyobi, wow, right? And people around us are just amazed. They're like, oh my God, that's amazing. These kids are learning Japanese. This is fantastic. What were you saying? And the big kid was saying Monday, and we said Tuesday, and he said Wednesday, and we said Thursday. We just went through the days of the week, right? But it was fun. It was an important moment for them to get a sense of this is part of me. I am part of something. So that sense of, oh, okay, I'm part of this group. And I called the whole thing, by the way, the SCTHJLP. So Silver Creek was the high school, right? Silver Creek Thunderously Hip Japanese Language Program. which I thought was a perfectly good name for a language program at a school. And so I'm a former teacher, and I bring a certain kind of, what is it that we can do that's a little different to how I think as a result of that work. I'm also a former principal. I was a principal of an online high school, an online and asynchronous high school, which was rare. This was actually in the O's, right? This was almost 20 years ago. And we had this, it wasn't like a global online school. Instead, it was just our county, a small region. And we would work with the students online, but when it was time for them to test, they would come to us. So they'd come to the school where we had the offices and things, and they would say, I'm ready for this, I'm ready for this. And it could happen at any point, right? So in work, if they came in and we were talking about a history test, for example, so in United States history, you may know we fought a civil war in the 1860s. Yeah, hopefully we're not moving in that direction now, right? But we fought a civil war in the 1860s, and the period after was a period called Reconstruction. So, it's a very important period to understand if you truly understand your U.S. history. And so if the kid came in and said, I'm ready for my test, okay, well, you've been doing the Reconstruction unit. Let's just start. Tell me what Reconstruction is. And if the kid said, oh, well, it was the period after the Civil War, the economy in the South had been destroyed because of the labor base and the slaves. And, it's like, all right, good. Yeah, here's the test. You go ahead. And then they'd take the test. But if the kid came in and said, yeah, Reconstruction, they built it again. It's like, you don't know, right? You don't know this material. Oh, let me take the test. Let's just see what grade I get. No, you don't know it. You fail. What you'll need to do is go back and learn it. Our system actually helped them to be very honest with what they did and did not know. But they were used to a system where the grade was everything. So they were thinking about the grade. Can I get the grade I need? To the point where they might not even think about the learning at all. Where can I get extra credit for this and this and this? The abstraction of grades is perhaps a necessary element of our system, but it can get in the way of learning. So when we talk about amazing learning, nobody in the chat earlier said everybody gets a perfect grade, right? That's not how we think about it. What we really think about is the learning. And so as we jump into kind of possibilities on this front, one more thing about kind of my background so that you know where I'm coming from. I run a company. So I was a high school teacher, I was a principal, and then I started a company called Next Vista. It's a nonprofit company. Sometimes I think of it as a very nonprofit, right? And what we do is we have a library of videos by and for teachers and students everywhere. It's all free to use, free to contribute to, free to download from, all of that, right? And it's my own little attempt to save the world from ignorance, one creative video at a time. Woo! All right. So that's who I am. And there are things that we do. So, for example, there is a thing that we started. I'll put a link in the chat. The NVIV. All right. And what's the NVIV? Well, it's a video with a number of questions in it that can be a writing prompt or a discussion prompt. Why do we do that? Because teachers are crazy busy. You guys are really, really busy. I'm guessing that none of you are like, I am so bored as a teacher. No one. So as a teacher, you're crazy busy. If someone is creating lesson activities that you can incorporate in some way, we figure that's useful. So that's a thing that we put out there. I hope that's useful to you. Feel free to use it. We're posting new ones every week. All right. But that's the kind of thing that we do. And the goal is to kind of get people in this space of thinking like, wow, that's a new way to look at something, because we want to get them away from thinking about the abstraction of grades and things like that, right? We want them to kind of be in that space where they begin to think, okay, yeah, that's something I really want to learn more about. So let's see, who was it that said this? It was a really cool comment. Syed, right? A lesson that makes students look forward to the next lesson, right? That's the idea. Have these moments in class where this happens. All right. So I'm a former teacher, former principal. I run this thing. What I do with Next Vista is that I work with schools and teachers and school leaders around the world, and it's really fun. And what I do is I try to help them tell their stories better. I want you to know that I believe this. I believe that amazing learning happens at your school every day, but do people know about it? Right? Do they know? Do they know that this cool activity happened? Often, at least here, the answer is no, they don't know. And there are reasons. When we go into the class and we do what we do, we think our audience is just the students. We work with the students. We try to help them come up with we try to make that happen, but we don't think about our audience being our colleagues. Hey, I tried this in class today, it went really well. It was horrible, whatever. Where we talk about those things so that we really explore that. And I think these stories happen at schools every day, that some of the wonderful, wonderful stories of learning that happen at your schools often don't get told, but people need to know. They really do. The community needs to know, the families need to know, so that when here, the joke is that parents look at their kids and say, hey, what happened at school today? Nothing, right? And that, I mean, come on, right? What, you stared at a wall all day? What happened? So truly something happened, and we want to make sure that the kids are excited to talk about it. That's another way of looking at amazing learning. The kid comes home, goes to different people in the family and says, I got to tell you about what happened today. That's a nice bar right there, right? So this is the kind of thing that I talk about when I work with schools. All right, so Now, I do a lot of work with schools in different places, but there's one school that I work with more than any other, and it's a Catholic high school in San Mateo, California. It's about 35 minutes up the road from where I am. And it's Serra, S-E-R-R-A. It's Junipero Serra High School. It's a boys' high school. Now, when I think of like how we raise boys in the United States, we could do better. Let's just say we could do better. And one of the things about our school is we get these, I would say, 13-year-old knuckleheads coming into the school, and we turn them into pretty good young men by the time they graduate. And it's kind of this whole set of things that's a part of it. And there's not a simple system that you can replicate. We're tapping into the strengths of our people in ways that I think work really well. We have some interesting classes. We have this kind of opportunity to get them doing some things that is really, really fun. And one of those things about their learning that we do is a class that I co-teach called Creative Solutions for the Global Good. So that's the other piece of this title, right? Creative Solutions for the Global Good is a class that we have been doing for several years now. So we started it 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And the goal is to use design thinking in very interesting ways to help students begin to be able to more creatively problem solve and to see their own possibilities in new ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to describe this class so that you can kind of think about, is there something about what they're doing in this class that represents something I can incorporate into what I do, whether it's philosophically or in terms of the resources that are a part of it, or anything along those lines. By the way, I saw a question in the chat a bit ago. It says, how do you, Syed asks, how do you do that? I don't remember what it is I did that you're asking about. I apologize. But let me know, and I'll certainly do that. And feel free to put questions into the chat as we go. I welcome that for sure. I'm easily distracted as well, so there you go. Okay, so creative solutions for the global good. There are three kind of main things that we do in this class. Now, I want to start, transform knuckleheads. That's awesome. Yeah, I'll explain how we do our part in it as we go through, and hopefully that'll help answer the question. That's a good question. So three things in this class that are kind of the top tier of importance for what the class is. Creative solutions for the global good, right? The first is telling stories, great stories. And one of the beautiful things about the internet, there's a lot of problems with the internet, but one of the beautiful things about the internet is that it is an amazing vehicle for sharing great stories. I'm going to tell you about 4 stories that are all stories that I've used as a part of this class. I show them a video of some interesting thing almost every class. I should add, we meet once a week. They spend a lot of time working on a project that I'll talk about in a minute. but almost every class we deal with a short story. So maybe a 3 to 5 minute video about something. In the upper left, there is a group. Now this is in India, called Global Himalayan Expedition, right? And I want to tell you what they do, because this is a cool story, right? As you know, there are places in the world, and certainly in mountainous regions of countries like India and Pakistan, where there are villages with no electricity, right? None. So how do you help a kid become like a kid who can compete in a global economy when they don't even have electricity to be? That's hard, right? So that, it's a nice thought that these folks should have electricity, but it's a great idea what Global Himalayan Expedition did. They said, okay, there are these people from all over the world who love to go trekking in the mountains. What we'll do is we'll invite them to pay us to go trekking to these villages, but we will also train them to set up solar panels and systems so that there can be microgrids in the villages, so that when they go there, they're meeting these people, they're getting a chance to help them develop these power systems. They help train the women in the villages to become techs for the solar panels, so that they'll have those skills to be able to work with other villages in the area. And the people who are paying to help do this are getting a life experience of the highest order. That's a cool story, right? That's really, really cool. And I think kids need to hear about people like that who say, let's come at this from a totally new angle. We could get people to pay us to help put all these things together. All right. In the upper right, it's a house. You're like, okay, so it's a house. So what? The people who constructed this house, all right, are people who decided that they wanted to do this. They want to end global homelessness. Okay, that's a big goal, right? Good goal, big goal. Now, so what is it about this house? This house was created with a very large 3D printer. This is a 3D printed house. And the system that they developed, all right, can essentially build this house. I mean, not plumbing and everything, of course, but just the frame and everything in 24 hours for a cost of less than $4,000. So you look at houses. This house is in Austin, Texas. The median home price in Austin, Texas is something like $250,000, $300,000 or more or something, right? So the idea that you can do the basics of building a house for $4,000, that's something interesting. And there are places where poverty has been endemic, in places in Mexico, other parts of Latin America, where they are building these houses to make communities so that people have the chance to have homes that they're proud of, that are nice, and they can really begin building the other aspects of a local economy because they're housed. That's interesting. That's really cool. When kids see that people think along these creative lines, they can learn much more. Because if you just watch the news, oh my goodness, it's depressing, right? Scandal and the war and all. I mean, it's depressing. But if you focus on stories about people really creatively finding wonderful ways to make a difference in the world, that's cool. Lower left, you see a little girl dressed as Wonder Woman. Okay, so what's going on with this? This is from an organization called Magic Wheelchair. Oh my God, these people are cool. What it is the guy who founded it, he has 3 sons who all are in wheelchairs. And his oldest son, I think you guys, do you know what Halloween is in the United States? I mean, is that something you're aware of on that? I'll just watch the chat. Okay, good. Yeah, kids dress up, there's candy, whatever. So this guy who founded this organization, his oldest son told him, hey, for Halloween, I want to be a pirate. And he said, all right. And he thought, well, we can make you a pirate costume, but in the wheelchair, it's kind of hard to see the costume, right? But what if we create a pirate ship that becomes something we put onto the wheelchair? So you're now a pirate in a pirate ship, and you're moving around, in your wheelchair, but you've got the coolest costume in the whole school. Yes. So this is very important for, like, family memories and things like that, but it also involves a lot of people. So for example, there are people in cosplay and Comic-Con and makerspace. These are all people who are like, you want us to help build a pirate ship? No problem. Let's do it. That's cool. That's really cool. In this case, the little girl wanted to be Wonder Woman. So they created the invisible plane out of plastic, right? How cool is that? This is bringing creativity to help others in a way that everybody celebrates. You don't forget being part of something like this. If you're part of a team that built like the invisible plane for the little girl, you look at that smile, you're like, you will never forget that. You will never forget that, right? And so those kinds of moments, those kinds of stories are very important for getting kids to think about their own possibilities. In the lower right, what is this? All right, well, you probably know that toy where you pull it and it spins the thing in the middle, right? A whirligig or whatever it's called, right? Those kinds of things. Why is that interesting? Because the guy the guy I'm going to talk about here is a guy named Manu Prakash. He's a professor at Stanford University, just up the road here. Good place, right? And he has this engineering team, and he'd gotten to thinking about centrifuges. So you know what a centrifuge is? You get a blood sample, you put it in a test tube, and it spins it around really fast in order to separate out the red blood cells with the other components of the blood. So that's what a centrifuge does for medical purposes. And in a lot of clinics and hospitals in rural parts of the world, they don't have centrifuges. And there's actually no mystery as to why they don't. They're expensive, they're heavy, and they require electricity. And any of those might be a problem for some rural clinic or hospital, right? So Manu Prakash went to his engineering team and said, all right, we need to make a centrifuge that costs less than $1, can be folded up and put in your pocket, and doesn't require electricity. Well, there's a bold challenge, isn't it, right? But they figured it out. They figured it out because one of them got to thinking about this toy that spins this thing in the middle so fast and says, what if we create really small test tubes that have like a blood sample in it, and we put them in a certain way, and we do it, and can it work? It did. You can get like speeds, revolution speeds with the central paper piece. All right, so that it does it so fast that it separates out the blood, which is important. That's cool. It's so cool to know that there are people out there like Manu Prakash, right, that make this kind of things happen. So one important element for the Creative Solutions for the Global Good class is to hit them with lots and lots and lots of stories like this. So that link I gave you a little farther back, it's still in the chat, right? Like that NVIV, that's one way I'm sharing these kinds of stories with the world. So you can incorporate that into a class that's designed to get kids thinking a little more creatively. So 3 big elements to Creative Solutions class. The first, stories. Now, the second, international connections. In essence, exactly what we're doing right now, right? Here I am sitting in my house in San Jose, California, talking to a bunch of cool educators who like spent like the last part of their Friday listening to this guy in California talk about what he thinks is cool learning. All right, and the technology is there. It's free. It's freely available to us. Can we use that in a way to inspire students? Well, that's a part of the class. So what you're looking at in the slide right now is Table Mountain. It is part of the landscape for Cape Town, South Africa. There is a school in Cape Town called Parklands College, and it's a pre-K to 12th grade school. Amazing school, really, really interesting people, right? And I'm connected to them because I spoke at a conference down there and got to know them, and they're really cool. And we got to talking and said, hey, let's get our students in this Creative Solutions class and your students in the girls' science and math program to talk to each other about ideas they're having and the projects they're doing. And so those international connections become very important for what it can mean for them beginning to share their ideas. Because here's something that I say a lot, all right? When students know that others will see their work, they want it to be good. When they know that it's just for the teacher, they want it to be good enough. You with me? Right? Can I get the grade that I want? Often that's what's in the kid's head when it's just for the teacher. But if everybody's going to see what you're doing, if the rest of the class is going to see it, if people in a school on the other side of the world are going to see it, now maybe they're like, maybe I should make this a little better. Yeah, maybe you should. Right? So that kind of thing is important for how we think of quality. And presenting their ideas is a part of how the class works as well. So at the end of the school year, we have this thing where we say, all right, we're going to have the students tell about the projects they've done all year. This happens in a lot of places. It's a good thing to do. Before COVID, what we did was we said, all right, we'll bring, like, their families will come in, and we'll have some administrators. Maybe if a few teachers are free, we'll bring them in, and we'll have them present, in a room, and all good. And that was, we had breakfast burritos for everybody, so that was great, right? But that's a limited audience. Under COVID, we couldn't do that, of course. So what we did was we said, well, let's do this via Zoom. And I reached out to loads of people I know all over the planet. And I thought people would be like, oh, that's really cool. I'm sorry, I'm busy that day. But no, loads of people said, yeah, we'd like. We ended up with about 100 people from 15 different countries joining a Zoom to be able to watch these kids talk about their projects. And it was really, really fun, right? And we found some clever ways to kind of make it all the smoother a thing. So because we had 2 of our students presenting and 3 girls from South Africa presenting. So it was these 2 schools presenting projects at the same time. And in doing this, between presentations, so a kid would finish, while that kid is finishing and the other kid's getting the slides up, I would just read some of the things that were a part of like what we were doing, or the audience. So like, here were the first 4 people in the audience, right? And I'm reading them this way. Adelisa Gonzalez Lugo, Executive Director and Lead Educator, Fundación Cortez, Puerto Rico. Aggie Freeman, Director of Rotacare Bay Area and Rotacare Free Clinics, Rotary District 5170, Membership Chair, California. Angelica Murata, Cybersecurity Researcher, Italy. Anjali Prajapati, member of Mensa India and Mensa Dhruv Scholar, India. And I'm going through like all of these people, I'm just reading off these names of these people while the kids are getting the slides up. And there were a lot of interesting people, right? So one of the people in it was, for example, a guy who is in charge of the Model UN and TED Ed Club at his schools, and he's the lead singer of the Complaints Department, a band that's popular in Japan. He's in Japan, right? So having those kind of moments where the kids are like, wow, this is really a global audience, can be good for how they think about what it is that they do. So I've told you about the stories. I've told you about the international connections, and I've moved into the third piece of this class that's so important, and that is the projects. So their job is to do one project over the course of the year, right? A project that can help others. And I'm going to tell you about Matt's project. So Matt Surza is a kid who was in the class the last 2 years and just graduated, last spring. But I want to tell you about his project. So he's a very techie kid, right? It's like into computers, things like this, all good. Well, his project 2 years ago was to do something about a problem that he saw at the Senior Citizen Center where he volunteered time. So older folks who come into the Senior Citizen Center, one of the things they do is they go to the computer lab. They've got 4 computers, and they would get on email and on Facebook to connect with people in, their families and friends in other places. So the problem was that these folks were not the most technologically savvy, let's just say, and they would click on things that would download viruses and malware onto the computers. So what Matt ended up doing was spending his time cleaning the computers that the seniors are using to do this stuff. But he wanted to help them. He wanted to sit down with them. This is how you do this. This is how you connect with your friend, that kind of thing. Well, he gets about 90% of the way into this project, which was to program a Raspberry Pi, a small computer, to interrupt the ads before they get to the lab, right? So that the seniors wouldn't click on those things and download the viruses, right? He gets about 90% of the way through this. It's a working system. He's got to work out some things. COVID. And so now he can't go to the senior center. The seniors can't go to the senior center either. So all of these older folks who were using the computers at the senior center to connect with friends and family, right, are at home. Matt comes to us at the beginning of the last school year. This was September, right? And he says, I think I need to change my project. I said, all right, well, you know, what are you thinking about? He says, well, the seniors that I help at the senior center, they're at home and they're isolated. They're isolated from friends and family. We want to put the word out of the community that we will take donated laptops. We'll refurbish the laptops to be Zoom ready. And then we'll get them back in the hands of the seniors who need to connect with their friends and family because they're isolated. We're like, that's awesome, do it. And he did. He and a friend like made this happen, right? You know, they used a social network thing, Next Door, we call it, so hyper local, you know, to put word out that they were taking these. They got things in. Sometimes they'd get really strong computers that weren't appropriate, you know, for the senior citizens, but they could sell it on eBay in order to buy solid state drives to refurbish the laptops effectively. They had a very good system. They had to learn tracking of inventory and all of this stuff. Really cool project, right? So not only is it a fantastic project, but PR, right? He wins a county contest for this project. And at ISTE, International Society for Technology and Education, at the ISTE conference last summer, he was one of 3 students on a main stage. It was Zoom, but main stage, right? Talking to thousands of teachers about what he had done. That's authentic learning, right? Where they've made a difference in some way, and there's the possibility for inspiring them, right? So Sadia says, perhaps all the campuses can display projects online in school and put it up on a screen. Yes. Matter of fact, I'm working with our school now on that very project because we're refurbishing some of our spaces to be able to do that. These stories of student projects can be inspiring not just to the students, but also to us as teachers. Because we're doing lots of interesting things, can we take it to a point where we're having the students tell the stories of their interesting learning that can be really powerful for the community? All right. So my message essentially is that I'm hoping as you look at these ideas that you will think, you know, we're going to launch something. We're going to launch something because why not, right? I mean, there's so many possibilities out there. I also want to make sure that I have given you, by the way, let me call this up. We have that thing where the students were presenting their projects. I have that here on my site. That link is now in the chat, and feel free to watch it. See what you think. You know, it would be wonderful to, you know, connect with you and talk about this as an idea. So we want to launch something at school, whether it's a class or an activity or a club or whatever, but it does exactly what Sadia is talking about, right? A practical approach to something that they've learned, right? So that becomes this dynamic story of who they are as learners. So I'm launching this month, by the way, a totally new project called Improve the World. And this is another thing I want to tell you about real quick. So what this is your students have cool ideas. So we think about the ideas from like Global Himalayan Expedition and Magic Wheelchair, right? And the 3D printed houses, right? And the paperfuge. Our students can have ideas like that. And we're inviting them in 90 seconds or less to explain their idea. And in putting this together, what we want is for them to be able to share those ideas so that we can get those ideas in front of service clubs around the world. I'm a Rotarian, Rotary clubs, right? And what we do is we find ways to do service projects locally and globally. And a lot of these, there's 36,000 clubs around the world. A lot of these clubs, you know, they've been doing kind of the same service project for years. If they had an idea about a new kind of project, it was given to them in a short video by a student in Karachi or San Jose or anywhere, right? And they could launch something really cool. That would be great, because the creative solutions for the global good class it's a great thing, but it's about having kids actually do a project. I'm thinking about improve the world as the step before that. Hey, just come up with an idea, right? And try to help kids understand the difference between a nice idea, right, or a nice thought and a great idea. And so I've put together, like a video about explaining that and all that kind of thing. So anyway, so feel free to get involved, stay in touch with me on that. I'd love to work with you on this as a possibility. As I mentioned, inspiring videos. Moments that matter to kids come through stories. I believe that, where they begin to think, oh, I want to make that happen, in my community as well. So this is the link that we put up before. We're going to add that again, if you want, but stay in touch with me. I'm going to get you to all these things. I've written some books, by the way, so this is a shameless plug, right? Ding. All right, so I've written some books about learning, and if these are useful to you and you read them and you have questions, just let me know, right? You say, hey, we got a group at our school studying your book. Oh, cool. Yeah, let's connect via Zoom and talk about it, right? I'm happy to do that, right? Just free, that's fine. All right, so let me know. This is my final slide, and this is how to stay in touch with me. So here's my email address, rh@nextvista.org. I'll put that in the chat as well. Boop, right there. Right. And I answer every email I get eventually. All right. So feel free to write me on that. The video library is at nextvista.org. I'm on Twitter at Rushton H. Right. I don't tweet a lot, but I'm there. The 5-day challenge sounds like some kind of a cleanse, but what that is really is a teacher challenge, right? To try some new things, and it works on areas that are in my book called Making Your Teaching Something Special. So it's just some ideas. This is all free to use. The 5-day challenge is free. More about my writing is there at rushtonh.com/writing. The resources, lots of free resources are available on these pages here. I've got a newsletter, nextvista.org/newsletter, and you're welcome to sign up for that and share ideas on that as well. And everyone, please turn on your cameras for a group picture. I think that sounds cool as well. And then finally, this link, the tiny URL for Cedar School here, copy the link address. Let me get this over here. And that's, let me clean up some stuff here and then we'll have it. But this will get you back to all my slides as well, so that you can follow any of that you'd like. Well, guys, you have been listening. Oh, no, that's not staying. Nicely done, Syed. All right, so you've been listening to me talk for like 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it's been, and I'm happy to answer some questions if you got them as well. But thank you again for letting me be part of the Cedar School Tech Conference. It is really, really awesome to have that opportunity, and I hope that you're walking away with some cool ideas. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. I've learned so much about how students have created such creative solutions for different world problems, even though they lack resources, and how technology has been amazing for that. You can see the participants' enthusiasm in the chat. So thank you so much again.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And by the way, you mentioned something so important, which has to do with lacking resources. What the students really need is the chance to be creative and make something happen. That requires almost no resources. It's just a decision about how we spend our time. And I'm glad you guys found this engaging as well. I do believe this. If when I'm presenting at a conference, if I'm not having fun, I'm doing it wrong, right? So, and I kind of think the same way about teaching. If we're not having fun teaching, maybe we're doing it wrong. So definitely, just kind of explore these ideas together. Having this chance to be part of a group that comes together like at CSTEC and to share those ideas is something very special for us.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll be ending the session then. Have a great day.
All right. You guys have a wonderful evening. All right. I'll enjoy the rest of Friday for everybody.